One of my favorite things I've been learning lately as I try to become a more well-rounded beer nerd has been beer and food pairings. As the most popular alcoholic beverage on earth, beer clearly must go well with food. Most people know classic combinations like German lagers and Wurst sausage, or salty oysters with sweet and bitter stouts. And it's pretty clear that mankind has been brewing beers that go well with their favorite foods for hundreds or thousands of years. With the dawn of the internet, though, information on great combinations of beer and food abound. But with that freedom and access to great information, there comes a cost of a lot of terrible information too. Hey, this is Ryan with Beer by the Numbers, and today we're not going to look at great beer and food pairings, but rather we're going to look at terrible lists of beers that people have tried to pair with other things. Normally, when someone asks me about what kind of beer would be good for a certain situation, I can come up with a pretty good answer based in some sort of logic. But online, there are lists that try to pair beer with things like personal failures or comic books. So today we're going to count down 5 of the worst beer pairing lists I could find on the World Wide Web. Without any further ado, let's get started. Our first list is about pairing beer with food, but it's not exactly classy like pairing beer with a nice cheese. Rather, this author tries to pair beer with his kids' leftover snack foods. Most of the time as a parent, you're tied up chasing toddlers around, so you don't have a ton of time to make yourself a great dish that will pair perfectly with your craft IPA. So why not try to pair your favorite brew with your kids' food that you have to make anyway? This list has some pretty unique pairings, but they seem to all follow the fundamental principles of pairing beer with food. What do you pair with dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets? Why, a great Berliner Weiss, of course. You might think this sounds weird, but the author does a good job of actually explaining why. The tartness of the Berliner does a great job of pairing with the umami meat flavors contained in the chicken nuggets. How about a PB&J sandwich with a nice dry Irish stout? You gotta pair rich food with rich beers after all, and a pretty good suggestion if you ask me, if a bit unorthodox. But our next list will take unorthodox to a whole new level. So a lot of websites try to pair various movies and TV shows with beer. As a beer nerd, there really isn't much of a scientific basis for these pairings, as interpreting films and TV shows is pretty subjective to begin with, and then you try to match beers on top of that, and it's more than a little dubious. But occasionally, websites try to drive clicks by pairing a really popular show with the world's best beverage so they can hog some search engine traffic with a cobbled together list. And that's exactly what the Stranger Things beer pairing list from Wave Train Intermedia is. Look, trying to assign beers to characters who actually drink beer is one thing. Perhaps they have a signature beer or a lifestyle that lends itself to a particular style of beer. But this list insists on assigning beer pairings to characters who are never shown drinking in the series, like the main boys with the Rogue Brewing's Hazelnutty Chocutabulous. This author's reasoning was that the name of the beer sounds like it was straight out of the 80s, like the characters, and that kids like candy, and that's just some bullshit right there. But they go one step further and assign a beer paired with the Demogorgon, which, spoiler alert, is the scary-ass creature that likes to stick tentacles down people's throats. Does this thing ever drink beer? Why would it? Why does this list even exist? All these questions were running through my head while I was reading this one. Our next list tries to pair media with beer, but all the choices the author makes are just so simple that they make me cringe a little bit. Comic book heroes and beer. Captain America and Sam Adams. Can we really get any less creative than that? Actually, yes, this list does, because a little later we see Ghost Rider and Rogue's Dead Guy Ale. Seriously? You could have done a cool spicy beer because, Ghost Rider's face is on fire. But no, he's got a ghost, so we go with Dead Guy Ale. This list rounds off with The Flash being paired with Four Loko because the author says, quote, "It's so obvious he doesn't even need to explain why." Perhaps you should explain why, author, because I'm assuming it's because Four Loko, which isn't even beer, gets you drunk really, really fast. I'm just gonna move on to the next one. So as I kept going through these, I found one that I thought could redeem these sort of lists. Many sports fans like to enjoy a beer or two as they watch their favorite team or individual vie for victory. Trying to pair a beer with a particular sport or time of year the sport is played, I think is a pretty worthy thing to do, but this list takes it one step too far. USA Today published a list of 18 beers, each paired with one single golf hole for the Masters tournament in Augusta. For those who aren't big professional golf fans, the Masters is a great spring tournament where a wide variety of plants are showcased amongst the golf holes. So this author tried to pair beers that were named after plants with some of the great foliage on the course. A noble attempt, no doubt, but this brought a pretty crazy idea to mind. What if you tried to drink a beer for every hole in a single afternoon, according to this list? For bringing this possibility of trying to get really drunk while watching classy golf, and also being the most ridiculous sports list I found, USA Today has earned a place in this video. Finally, we end with a list that isn't trying to celebrate what you're pairing with beer, but rather tries to give you advice on how to drown your sorrows in the most ironic way possible. Crack.com brings us 5 tips for pairing beer with your personal failures. With recommendations like pairing the terrible Beer 30 Light with the sense of failure that comes from the sudden awareness that you've established artificial hurdles in your life for fear of being truly successful, this list is trying to tell you how to optimally drink away your sadness with cheap, crappy beer. As a bonus, I also found a variety of quizzes or personality tests that try to match you up with a beer style. Some were okay, but most were pretty bad. The king of bad personality quizzes, Buzzfeed, had one of the worst, and I'm going to throw a link to that terrible quiz in the description below so you can see which beer matches you best, and to see just how bad the clip art-based quiz can be on today's modern internet. So there you go, beer nerds, 5 of the weirdest beer pairing suggestions I found. I'll link to each of them in the description below, along with that terrible Buzzfeed quiz. While you're down there, leave me a comment telling me what's the weirdest thing you've paired beer with. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already to stay updated on our latest beer content. Once again, this has been Ryan with Beer by the Numbers, and I'll see you in the next video.